I'm not going to let this be a defining moment. In fact, if it's going to be a defining moment, it's going to be a defining moment in our recovery. It's going to be a defining moment in our rebirth of our relationship. It's going to be a defining moment in how life is supposed to be for us. And I just remember going, I'm going to go in, I'm going to document, I'm going to put this thing together, and I'm going to let our recovery story become somebody's survival guide. And that's when I decided that, like, okay, this is what's going to be coming next. Well, today is going to be a different kind of episode. First of all, welcome to the No Regrets Blueprint podcast. I'm your host, Matt Lewczenko, and today my guest is me. I've been asked a lot of different questions around launching this podcast. And so if you're listening to this, it's likely early on in this podcast's lifespan, if you will. I know I've posted the first few episodes and I've got a bunch that are batched and scheduled ready to go. And so I've had a lot of people ask me, they were super curious a lot about the journey of the No Regrets Blueprint podcast. And so I decided I would take all of these questions, put them into one spot, and then I want to give you the episode. I want to give you the origin story of everything to know about the No Regrets Blueprint podcast and myself along the journey. So let's just jump into it. First part, right? So the question was, who was Matt before the No Regrets Blueprint? And so today, the question was, people know me as a coach, a speaker, an author, and a leader. But before all that, who were you? Boy, we could go back pretty far. However, before I got into real estate, I came to Kansas City in the early 2000s, 2003, for my master's degree in acting and directing at UMKC. And so I was here as a student, and part of the graduate program was to also be a teaching assistant. And so I was a graduate teaching assistant teaching theater classes to non-majors. And one of the things that I discovered is I absolutely love teaching. I love, and especially working with people that are non-creatives. And so I would be teaching theater classes to like pharmacy and business students, et cetera. And it was just really kind of fun to get the analytical types to open up and use that other side of their cortex and start getting into the creative outlet of, like, getting out of their own way, being willing to feel stupid and dumb. And some of the exercises that we did are kind of ridiculous. And I just recall, one of the exercises was like, I want everybody to hit the ground and roll around like the color purple. And I just remember, even after saying it, I'm like, man, if anybody was outside looking in, it's probably thinking that we're crazy. Some of the students that were taking that class probably felt the same way. And yet that's where I really discovered my love for coaching, for teaching, for inspiring and helping others. And then, I graduated and got into, graduating grad school, I was working on shows here and there. I was teaching theater and a lot of different programs around the community. And yet I couldn't make enough money. And so I started taking jobs. I was working in retail, and in retail, I started learning how to sell because we were selling insurance for technology products, et cetera. And so I was listening and watching people that were doing it really well. And I was just kind of like looking at it as a scientist going, how are they doing it really well? What are they talking about? And I discovered like the very beginnings of a needs analysis, right? Like if you can understand like what someone's pain point is and why they're there to begin with, and then you can solve for that pain point in the future, like things would happen. So I started developing my sales skills there, and then that developed further on. And then that's when somebody actually introduced me to real estate, more on the investing side. And then that journey just took off, where I ended up getting my real estate license and then growing my real estate business personally pretty quickly. And then people were asking me like how I did what I did. So I would be sharing those things. And then those individuals were getting success. And so I was asked to step into coaching and start helping others. And I never felt like I was ready for it. So it was just, I was like, sure, I'll help you go. And so I developed a new agent training program, and then that got some attention because it got a lot of success. The agents in that program did well. And then, so I started getting asked to lead offices and grow those offices and run those offices. And I was like, I don't have an MBA. I have an MFA. Are you sure you want this guy running your buildings? And they were like, yeah, for sure. You got what it takes. And so that's when my career in leadership kind of took off. In those roles, I had the privilege of coaching and consulting with other real estate businesses, and started really understanding kind of the science around scaling. And then I've always had a passion for mindset and coaching around mindset. And so, thought leaders like Brian Tracy and Jim Rohn and T. Harv Eker and all of these mindset guys, I was really passionate about that. And one of the things that I discovered early on is in this one coaching program that I attended, the author of that program talked about 90% of success is mindset, 10% is tactics and skill. And so as a student of mindset, I loved just diving into the psychology of leadership, the psychology of high performance and optimization. And so that was more of like my strengths as a coach have a lot to do with mindset, but then I also love to apply the practical and the tactical along with the mindset to help people get results. And that's kind of the beginning of my journey as a leader. Next question. What was life like during the years when your career was taking off? This is a hilarious kind of question because I think many entrepreneurs, if you're listening, you probably never feel like you're getting it done. I always felt like I was missing something or I was looking for the next thing and I was always trying to position myself for the next opportunity. And so what was life like during those years? I just always felt like I was behind. I always felt like I had to overperform or outperform, but not just like competing against anybody else. Like one of the things that people may not recognize is I've got a massive case of imposter syndrome and I've had it, always. And for the longest time, it was kind of like, I felt like it was a shadow or a crutch on top of this thing. And what I discovered, and this actually may be part of the next book coming out, is I began to learn how to use that imposter syndrome and treat it like a superpower. What do I mean by that? Is if I'm assigned or asked to do something and for whatever reason I don't feel like I'm valid or I'm ready or whatever, what I have done in the past is I over prepare. I get so deep into it that like I want to be so good at it and I want to be so ready that there's no question as to who invited me or why is this person leading this room or et cetera. So I used my imposter syndrome as a superpower and it just is always kind of worked for me that way. Next question is, what does success look like on paper? I mean, success on paper is really, look, there's so many vanity metrics out there in entrepreneurship and business. So many people talk about top line revenue, gross revenue, units sold, gross commission income, GCI. So what success looks like on paper is honestly like all of the awards that you see people receive. None of those awards actually talk about net profit, profitability, work-life balance or integration. Do you actually get time off? Like, do you like what you do? Those are the things that don't necessarily resonate on paper. And that's where a lot of what I talk about on this podcast and was in the book started to come from. I started to notice those types of symptoms, right? So the next question is, what did nobody see behind the scenes? Well, in my journey, I think nobody saw behind the scenes. The things that they didn't see behind the scenes was my background. So my background in theater, and I talked about this on a recent podcast that I was a part of, is when you are preparing for a show, you have to learn the script. You've got to get the words down quickly so then you can really start to do the work. And the thing is that memorizing the words is the easy part. After that, that's when you start to get into like the meat of what the show or what the play is about. That's where you get into like the heart of the intention behind the character and then what the author is really like looking to craft in this world. And so what nobody saw behind the scenes is in my career, a lot of the stuff in real estate is script based and a lot of agents really resist and push back against the scripts. And I was just like, well, scripts, it's no big deal. Like, let's just learn them. And so what happens is I would learn the scripts. So I would have the words in, and what that would allow me to do would allow me to actually be more present in the appointments that I'd have with buyers and sellers, because I wasn't worrying about what I had to say next, because I had learned those words or whatever the potential responses would be. So I could actually be more present. I could hear a little bit of like the pain points or the things that aren't being said between the words for those individuals. And that kind of gave me an unfair advantage kind of growing. So my business grew pretty quickly because I had that skill set behind the scenes that nobody really knew. The other side is that I am a voracious reader. I am constantly learning. I can't get enough. And so while everybody else is just doing what they do, I'm constantly diving in for more. I think a lot of it has to do with my internal imposter syndrome. Is like I can't learn enough because I need to know, because I don't want anybody to call me out on whether or not I'm valid. And so I am insanely curious about all things. I love learning. I love reading. And those are the things that happen behind the scenes. Next question. Were there warning signs that things were out of balance? There were times, and one of the first warning signs that things were out of balance, and I talk about it in the book, is, I had this habit of coming through the door on calls, and I would be either putting out a fire or dealing with something. And then my family hadn't seen me all day, and I would dismiss them, or I'd have a snap, or I'd be the dad that yelled. And nobody becomes a dad thinking, I'm going to be the dad that yells. Everyone's like, I'm just not going to be that guy. And I started seeing those things start to show up for myself. I started missing out on things. I started being late to dinners and such because I was trying to get this deal done, or I had to show some more things, or whatever. And, nobody tells you that you're like about to miss a last time, right? At some point, the thing that you're in is the last time, and you don't know that. And we always think that there's going to be more times. And so I had one too many of those to start seeing that things were out of balance. And I was like, ooh, I don't like this. And this was early on where I started to create kind of these rules for myself, as far as like, you don't walk in the door on the phone. Like if I'm on the phone, I go around the house, or other things, and started creating boundaries for myself and for clients and for team members, etc. Okay. Part 2. The entrepreneur's regret moment. Every movement usually starts with a moment. What was yours? Ooh, I started noticing, and I don't recall specifically exactly when, but I started noticing a pattern of high performing individuals that were, again, looking like rock stars on paper, that had completely disheveled and bad, like, personal relationships, physical and mental health, like all the things. And I started going, there's something behind this, right? And everybody's like, they've got these goals, and everyone says that when I ask anyone, like, what's your purpose? What's your big why? They say, well, it's my family, my wife, it's my kids. And yet, man, they're the first ones that we set aside whenever it's like the next opportunity to level up. A big client comes into town, or something happens, and you're just like, I'm going to be late to dinner. Or look, like you're on vacation, you're like, I got to take this call, just go ride the ride without me. And that stuff, like, those are the things that pile up, that start to get a little bit wild when you think about the moments that you might have missed. And that's I started seeing and noticing that. Next question here is, when did you first realize you might be winning professionally but losing personally? Those, like, I could be, the number one this or the number one that, but like, if I wasn't enjoying like alone time or family time, etc., I started realizing that I was like almost resenting my home time, and I didn't understand. It didn't make sense, because again, just like everybody else, like I was doing this for them, but then when I was with them, it was like, it didn't feel good. What I realized, and what I talk about in this coaching and the training, is there's this thing out there called achievement addiction. We're going to talk about it a little bit later in this podcast. And what happens is that we're wired as entrepreneurs for that dopamine hit when we get another deal, or we get a listing, or we get a buyer under contract, or we convert a lead, or whatever that is. And so what happens is, like, we get that dopamine reward of hunting and winning at work, and then we come home and it's quiet. There's no dopamine, there's no reward. And so I started recognizing that, and I was confused by it at first, and I didn't understand really what was going on. So what did it do? It caused me to work harder. And what did it do? It created a bigger and bigger gap of resentment. In the book, The Entrepreneur's Regret, I talk about it. It's called the entrepreneurial drift. It's one of the first things that you may start recognizing when you might be winning on paper and losing at home. Next question here. What was going through your mind when you realized your family wasn't getting the best version of you? Honestly, for me, I felt like I took it really personally, and it caused a lot of resentment and a lot of like self-loathing talk. One of the things that really showed up is, like, I started realizing, like, my drinking was kind of getting a little bit out of control, or a little bit excessive, or it would start a lot sooner, or it'd be more it'd be like almost daily. And I just was like, it's okay. Like, I work really hard. I earned it. I deserve it. Like, we have all those justification conversations around it. And I didn't like it. There was a time where I did 75 hard, and I I ended up like quitting drinking for like a year. And that went really well. And I thought I could go back and have a better relationship with alcohol. And that really wasn't the case, because it again gradually and then suddenly it started to get really it began to really interfere with how I really wanted to show up for myself and my family. And so last March 3rd, 2025, I just drew a line in the sand and just said, this is no longer part of my world. It's not good for me. And so I made a very, very distinct decision that alcohol was no longer part of my life. So how did my wife and kids experience that version of you? Man, it was rough. Like, and I did notice that they were like walking around like eggshells and around me. I was short tempered. I would snap back. I'd be distant. I'd be disconnected. I realized that it wasn't fair. It was tense, and I never wanted to be that kind of. I never wanted to be that version, and so that was again behind it. I said something's got to change, and yet it hadn't gotten bad enough to want to do it at that moment yet. And so I remember very vividly, though, distinctly noticing like they were accommodating me a lot, and looking back on it, man, I feel really, I don't like thinking about that. Right. The next question here is, if you could go back and talk to that version of yourself, what would you say? Man, I think it's easy to be like, grab myself by the lapel and be like, bro, listen, wake up, look, stop. What are you doing right now? Look at the people that you said you're doing this for. Look how you're treating them. Look how you're showing up here. You're a fraud. Like, you're completely out of integrity and out of alignment. Like, for me, my inner voice, my conversation's very like David Goggins, very intense, very in your face, very direct. And so like I would have a real candid conversation with myself, and the language wouldn't be really pretty. And I don't want to get like demonetized or whatever on this podcast, but it's aggressive and it's intense. So the conversation would be like a real wake up conversation. All right. Part 3, the lie most entrepreneurs believe. Next part. So what is the biggest lie high achievers tell themselves? I think one of the biggest lie high achievers tell themselves is, if I just work hard enough, things will settle down. I'll then be able to get to, and then I'll be able to slow down, or then I'll be able to, etc. That never comes. Every level has its devil. And the moment you think you got this figured out and you get to the next level, it brings its own challenges and surprises. And so one of the phrases around our house that my wife absolutely despises is, hey, I'm just 6 more months. In 6 months, I got this. In 6 more months, I got this. And that time never comes. In 6 months, the can gets kicked down even further. And I would say probably a tie for this lie that high achievers tell themselves is that they can outproduce their issues. And if they just bring home enough money, things will be okay. The vacations are better. The home is great, etc. The reality is, man, our kids don't care what we drive. They don't, etc. All they know is whether or not when you're there, or what version of you is there. And if they feel safe around you and they feel like they can open up, or all of those things. So why do so many entrepreneurs believe they can sacrifice now and make up for it later? I think a lot of it has to do with, like, if you're in entrepreneurship, you almost have to be delusionally optimistic in believing that if I just work hard enough, things will get figured out. Entrepreneurs are just wired differently. What most people would quit way earlier than most entrepreneurs do. And so we think like, hey, we're working hard right now. It's going to be worth it. Like, high risk, high reward. And so they just say, they just think that if they work hard enough, it'll be good later and everyone will be okay with the sacrifices that it took. And unfortunately, sometimes the people that we said we're doing this for aren't waiting for us on the other side. And that's what I started seeing as well. And I didn't like that. And I saw a warning sign in others, and it started creeping up into my world as well. Next question. What do you think most people misunderstand about work-life balance? I think the biggest misunderstanding, especially once we get really wired for that dopamine hit, that achievement addiction, is that you can't have both, or you can't have it all. And the reality is you can absolutely have a wildly successful business, a home life, a romantic life, and a relationship with your kids that other people dream about. And then you can have the body that you desire, the health that you deserve, and be mentally and emotionally regulated and well-balanced individual. You don't have to have one versus the other. And like, I think one of the biggest opportunities that we have is there's a lot of voices out there that are very popular that just really emphasize the hustle culture, and that hustle culture damaging and dangerous, right? And but it gets clicks, it gets a lot of likes, it's really controversial. And for those that are on that dopamine loop, it's validating. They say, yeah, I can work 15, 20 hours a day because this person says it's okay. I should post 60 pieces of content a day or whatever. And that's not reality. That's not real life, right? And that it's dangerous. And there's a place and a time for like being all in, and there's seasons in this. And don't get me like, and again, I had the privilege, and if you watched one of the episodes with Leo Pereira earlier on, he talks about like, go all in on your season. And he said in his 20s, his superpower was he had time. He didn't have the obligations of family, et cetera. And now that he's in this season, he says, I refuse. I won't do that. I don't want to live that life. And so I want to sleep. I want to be present and the best father, et cetera. Things change. And so the challenge is if you didn't go as hard as you could have in the season that you could afford to, well, in order to do it now, you're going to be sacrificing some things that are irreparable at times. And that's the hardest part. Next question. Why isn't time management the real problem? Man, the thing is that everybody's taken the class and understands how to color code their calendar and block it out, et cetera. The issue isn't time management. The issue is actually self-management. It's about being all in and doing the things when you should be doing them, and then creating the boundaries around the time and understanding like what are the most important parts of the time and executing on that. The other side of it is we don't value often our personal time as much as we value our lead gen time or our appointment time. And so we then allow things to bleed in and steal from our moments. And it's not a time management problem. It's a self-management issue. It's also a purpose or a lack of purpose issue. And that's where like real coaching and accountability comes in, especially whenever you're working on rewiring and reestablishing a new pattern of reward systems that and breaking that achievement addiction. And that's where a lot of what we're going to be talking about on this podcast and as part of the book and the No Regrets Blueprint itself, we spend a lot of time talking about how to rewire and create a new reward pathway that isn't just dependent on success being monetary or a top line number. So the next question is, what is achievement addiction and how does it show up in everyday life? Okay, well, I kind of went a little bit ahead on that and talked a little bit about achievement addiction. Achievement addiction is that addiction to the win, the hunt, that hit, that excitement of being able to turn, an email inquiry, an online lead, or a conversation where you're up against somebody else into new business, and turning that unknown into a relationship, into a client, into a conversion and a commission. And man, there's few things as exciting as creating income from almost nothing seemingly, right? Or being responsible for your own revenue and going out and hunting and creating opportunity through conversations and relationships or marketing or ads or online or whatever that is, right? And so like we start to get addicted to that feeling, and then we start looking for it everywhere in our life. And so when we come home, we generally have like a 3 or 4 hour window of where that dopamine before it kind of floods out of our system. And when we go home and there's that silence and there's just the presence, we start our brains are looking for that dopamine. And so how does it show up? Well, it shows up in like looking at our emails for the next day, planning out how the next day is, what your next appointments are, getting ready and like prepared for that next hunt or that next competition. And that's where the next day's achievement addiction steals from your moments and the right now. And that's where you start to see that entrepreneurial drift and the ignoring of the family or being short or actually not being there, even though you're present, being physically present and distant and emotionally unavailable. That's where it shows up in everyday life and it can become really damaging there. All right. So part 4 is writing the entrepreneur's regret, the book that's the basis of the no regrets blueprint. How did this come to be? What made you decide this message needed to become a book? Okay. A couple different things. I mean, 7 years before I wrote the book, I always had a desire of like, I always felt like I had something to share. And yet at that point, I didn't know what it was. And I just recall, I was working on my public speaking and I hired a public speaking coach. And I remember listening to his origin story and I remember listening to all these other origin stories of individuals that were like doing some amazing things in public speaking. And they all had like really tough upbringings and lives, et cetera. And I was just sitting there going, man, I don't have that. Like I grew up pretty well. I mean, I had no like traumas or issues. Like there was no abuse. Like there's none of that stuff. And I'm sitting there going, what story do I have? Right. But the warning that I share with everybody is I remember sitting there going, man, how am I supposed to write anything or really contribute anything without a story? And that was several years before this came to be. So about 4 years ago from right now is when for me all of this stuff kind of came to a head. I was making a career move. I was at a new brokerage and like all of these were coming to a head and my health and my drinking and all of these things were just interfering and I was just probably Alex Hormozy talks about it as being rock top. And that's where nobody talks about rock top. Everyone understands where rock bottom is. And what we don't like to talk about is where you could be winning by every measurable metric out there, number one this, and whatever it is. And yet underneath it all, you just you despise your life. You despise who you've become to where the people that you love are almost like you resist having to go back to that because it isn't as fun as it used to be, et cetera. And so that even that feeling becomes a resentment. And I just remember it all kind of came to a head one day and my wife and I were just sitting on the porch and she's like, you got to fix this. You got to fix this. You don't get to do this. You don't get to be like this. Go. And then I remember her just saying very clearly, she goes, get into your tool pouch as a coach and fix it. And I just remember going, okay, all right. If I'm going to be a great coach and a leader, I'm not going to let this be a defining moment. In fact, if it's going to be a defining moment, it's going to be a defining moment in our recovery. It's going to be a defining moment in our rebirth of our relationship. It's going to be a defining moment in how life is supposed to be for us. And I just remember going, I'm going to go in, I'm going to document, I'm going to put this thing together, and I'm going to let our recovery story become somebody's survival guide. And that's when I decided that like, okay, this is what's going to be coming next. And then I had a couple conversations with an accountability partner who had just finished a book and I was like, wait, you wrote a book? He's going to be on the podcast. Actually, he's scheduled, like, I think he's my next guest. You're going to meet Chris Ward. And he wrote his book, The Path to Purpose. And I remember going, how did you write this book? And he goes, I had a coach. And I was like, tell me more about this. And that's where I met Cody Purcell. I'm probably going to have Cody on the podcast here too. And he was probably the most pivotal person. We had gotten together and he helps authors put their ideas to life. He has a publishing company that he works with individuals like myself and other entrepreneurs. And I've helped several other individuals put their books together with Cody. And he's just exceptional at what he does. And I remember us sitting at the public market here in Lenexa and talking about a couple ideas. And I had 2 ideas in mind of what I wanted the book to be, what kind of a story I wanted. And I shared with him the idea for the entrepreneur's regret. And he just paused. And I mean, I got goosebumps right now, even as I'm talking about it, because he's like, do you feel that? And I'm like, yeah, kind of. He goes, no, listen. He goes, that's the book. And he goes, the Holy Spirit's here right now. He goes, can you feel that? And I'm like, actually, yeah. He goes, there's no question. He goes, this story has to be told. And I was like, all right, bet, let's go. And I just remember I said, all right, so what's next? I didn't even ask him like, how much is this going to cost? It's just like, what's next? And that's when really it all just started to flow. And then so Cody and I met like every week and I was sending him all of the content, the stories, etc. And he would be editing it and putting it together. And we, put the book together. I think it took about 7 months to write. And then it took me another 8 or 9 months to get it out in the public, because there's a part of this that nobody talks about. And that's the fear of putting out your story in public. And so the next question that I got in this series was there fear in putting the story out publicly? And like, hell yes. And interestingly enough, it wasn't until I finished the book, I went going, oh no, someone's going to read this. And there's a lot of vulnerability in here. And there's a lot of like loss and like there's a lot of stuff in here that I don't know now if I want anybody reading this. And then also, like, I'm not sharing this because I'm an expert. I'm sharing like a part of my journey and a part of the story that helped me get through this. I still have a lot to learn, and I still have to tap into these lessons every single day. Like, for those of you that know me, like, and like, I'm still, sometimes I still yell at the kids, and sometimes I'll be upstairs and my wife will just literally the other day, we were just having a family moment, and I got caught in my phone, and she goes, hey, no regrets guy. Like, when are you going to like get present? I was like, fair. Right. So interesting enough, there's a lot of fear in putting out a story publicly and having other people read it for judgment. And yet I knew there was still something inside of me that I knew that this had to get out there, because there's a lot of people like me that were in my position that hopefully this book would hit. So the next question, what did you hope readers would experience when they finished the book? The goal of the book was hopefully a rallying cry and a warning and a shot across the bow for those who feel stuck and feel like maybe they've gone too far on the pendulum in this direction and they don't know like what's next or how to fix it. And the reality is that if there's still a desire to fix it, it can be fixed. It can absolutely be fixed. And the experience, I would like to think that in some of the stories that I share, people could see themselves and resonate and just have like, look, entrepreneurship, the reality is it's lonely. Not a lot of people really understand what it's like to be up at 3 a.m. wondering like, okay, if this closes and that, et cetera, like we're good this month. Like there's just an emotional burden that we carry as entrepreneurs that is lonely. We don't like, not a lot of people feel this way. And so when I was sharing a lot of these stories and putting the book together and when I would go teach, I had people go, hey, I felt like you were like talking right at me. And I'm like, okay, good. Because I was, and I want to save families. I want to save some relationships. I want to save your future holidays to where your kids actually want to visit you when they have a choice to. I want there to be people around you to reap the rewards of all this work that you put in there. I mean, I can't imagine a worse result of working so hard and having nobody to celebrate it with. Like, that's just an absolute nightmare to me. And I don't want that. I don't want that for people. And I want this book to help those that do that. Next question. What surprised you most after people started reading it? What surprised? Well, I don't know if it surprised me most, but it was also really validating, is that people started reaching out saying, hey, I never realized, I didn't realize that what I was doing was this, and this awareness now has caused me to put my phone down or change the things, right? Change their trajectory, if you will. And these stories that I was getting from readers confirmed that we were really onto something here. And so the book was absolutely the beginning of that. So this next section, part 5, is about the field guide. Why was the field guide created? First questions, the book came first. Why wasn't the book enough? Look, if I point my camera over in this direction, I got a bookshelf with 300 books on personal development, self-help, all of these things. And I remember I was talking about at the very beginning, like, I'm such a passionate reader and I'm such a learner. But what I also found was like the self-help and the personal development space is so flooded with books that nobody does anything with. Like, what I didn't want this to be is a motivational tome, if you will. I didn't want somebody to feel a certain way reading it and then set it down and go back to the life that they started with. And in my coaching, we get after it through tactical and tangible change, and it's incremental at first, and consistency compounds, and it's just micro moments and micro movements. Small hinges move big doors. And this field guide is just a daily check-in and a daily journal. It's a 15-minute reflection and intention to set your day out. And it goes chapter by chapter with the book on how they can begin to create an awareness and then also create intentionality around the day, and then a reflection at the end of the day. And this is where we start to rewire how we start to perceive winning, and how we can take a look at what we have been losing at and start creating purpose and maybe some fun around creating reward systems in those other areas of our life that we've been ignoring. Next question. What did people struggle to implement after reading the book? Really, people struggle with anything after reading the book. First of all, because the book is pretty comprehensive, and it encapsulates and it covers the three core areas, the three pillars in life. When we talk about business, relationships, and personal development, those are the three key pillars in all self-help. Those are the three foundational pillars: business and finance, relationships, personal development, like physical and mental health. We talk about all of those in the book. And so that in itself, someone goes, well, I don't even know where to start. So they do nothing. And that's where I had to go, okay, how do I get people from day one making an incremental movement? And that's where I began the idea of like, okay, the No Regrets Field Guide. And we're going to go day by day, chapter by chapter for 12 weeks. There's 12 chapters in the book. It's a chapter per week, and it's a journal entry and a reflection every single day. And those are the things that allows you to, like, people get really fired up about doing something and they do way too much too soon, and then they don't create any habit and they don't create consistency around it. And that's where the field guide chunks it down and makes it so digestible that that's what allows transformation to happen, because it, like, the awareness kicks in, and then there's a little bit of evidence, and then you start to allow your subconscious and your conscious to start absorbing it, and they start to kind of connect. And then when you do this consistently over the 12 weeks, you start noticing some of your own patterns, and you start to get even ahead of it as well. And that's what makes the transformation different than just information. It's by tactically looking at yourself every day and moving forward with intention, instead of just being pulled in every direction by your work. So what happens when somebody actually starts practicing these principles? First and foremost, these principles will create pause. What happens when you start to notice what you do, you say, now I get to course correct, right? So awareness creates reflection. Reflection can create intention, and intention then leads to action. And that's what this is all about. I wanted to create awareness that this is something that you have. And then that awareness can create pause, and you can reflect and go, do I really want to continue to go down this way? And that pause will create intention. So I don't want to go in this direction. In fact, I choose to do something else. And that intention paired with action creates transformation. And that's what this is all about. So the birth of the No Regrets Blueprint. So the No Regrets Blueprint is an all-encompassing course environment, ecosystem, if you will, around this. It's bigger than the book. It's bigger than the field guide. We also incorporate a North Star value proposition workbook where we talk about identifying purpose and priority, and getting really clear on your why, what like some like to call, and just getting your motivational value systems in place, because those are a huge component of it. And that's I want to incorporate that. And then also put together, a custom GPT tool that you could have like me in your pocket when you do when you do all of these activities as well. And I just know that, like, I'm a huge consumer of courses online as well. And I found, some of the best authors that have created courses that have actionable, like, fast tracks or fast starts. I've implemented them, and then they've worked way more than just reading the book and doing a journal. And so I was like, okay, like how can I, if somebody really wants to do this and really wants to go in deeper and do more, how can I help them in a way that isn't one-on-one, that how can I put an ecosystem and a framework together for them? And that's where the blueprint came to be. And that's how that started. So what patterns was I seeing repeatedly with entrepreneurs? The patterns that I kept seeing is that it's really the path of least resistance and going away from the pain. And the pain that we were seeing was the pain of being present. And so people would just create like these creative avoidances to go into just entrepreneurship, and would create these patterns of discontent and disconnect and divorce and substance abuse, and then significantly overweight and out of shape, and also like emotionally dysregulated. And that's where I think the No Regrets Blueprint's different. And that's where most personal development fails. Most personal development fails with motivation and inspiration. And then there's no tangible and tactical steps to break the system, to break the cycles. What do I think is possible, and what do I believe someone who fully commits to the work can do? Man, listen, I don't know what's possible for you, but let me share with you what was possible for me. I am probably the happiest I've ever been in my life, not just business-wise, etc. My relationship right now with my wife and my kids is as good as I've ever imagined it to be. I look forward to spending time with them now. I love hanging out. I love just talking with them about their days. Look, I'm not perfect, not every day. Like there's gonna be days where it comes in. However, I can genuinely tell you that like when I walk through the door, like it's one of my favorite parts of the day. That's what's available to you if you choose to commit to the work, if you choose to dive into the principles behind it, right? So what's the mission? The mission behind this is I want to build a movement of entrepreneurs that are just adamant about getting their nights and their weekends back so they can actually be present instead of having to buy presents to prove to their family that they're still here for them, right? The movement is for really anybody that wants more out of life. I mean, my background is through entrepreneurship. That's my wheelhouse. And yet, like, if you're listening to this and you're not an entrepreneur and like you're like this resonates for you, like then it's for you. Like you can be an employee for somebody else and still have these same issues, right? Trying to climb the corporate ladder or trying to, whatever it is. Like if you want to become the best spouse, partner, significant other, and you want to get, your health physically and mentally in shape, and then also really just excel and crush in business, like this is for you. One of the last questions here is, what breaks your heart when you see entrepreneurs stuck in achievement addiction? What breaks my heart is that they created this. Like we get caught in the mousetrap that we created. And it's not your fault necessarily, because we got into this going, okay, I'm willing to do whatever it takes to make this thing work and grow success. And what can happen is that if it becomes successful, then if you don't have the right coaching, training, or accountability around you to help you put together the systems and the strategies to scale, to get some of your time back, once you've created this opportunity revenue, it will eat away at everything that you hold valuable. And all you'll have left is a business that owns you. And then the people around you don't want to be around you. And when you look in the mirror, you don't like who you see. That's what breaks my heart. What breaks my heart is people that know that they created this. And if you know you created this, then you can fix it. You can change it. So what does a life with no regrets actually look like? It is a life where you have the ability and the boundaries to be all in where you're supposed to be. I love working. I love building. I love creating these things. I love these podcasts. I love, helping people grow. Apologize for my chair. And then I love going on trips and vacations and having experiences with my family. And I also love pushing myself physically, and then also doing the deep work and really unwinding and unraveling, the generational habits and things that have been left to me, and like becoming the best version of myself, the best spouse, the best father I can be, and not saying, well, that's just the way it is. And that's how I grew up. And so I don't know any better. So I'm just going to do this way. That's such bullshit. I hate when people do that and say that. It just basically means to me, when you say that, it's like, well, okay, then you've just given up. Then you have given up and you don't care enough about the people that have asked you to change to change. And a life with no regrets is that it's a willingness to step into and become the version of you that you deserve and your family deserves. Next question. When somebody reaches the end of their life, what do you hope they remember? Man, that's a big question. I hope they remember, like, a life of no regrets is also one of no judgment of themselves or others, right? That they lived a life fully. They laughed hard. They loved extremely well. They did incredible things. They put themselves out there. They created opportunities for people. They lived and filled out their potential. They made an impact and a difference in other people's lives. Like, I'm also really driven and committed to succeed through others, right? Like, again, I'm fueled by this mission of helping families and helping entrepreneurs, again, live lives of no regret. And so when somebody reaches the end of their life, I want them to think like, hey, you know what? Like, I made an impact, and I was an author of my own success and this journey, and that the people that I cared most about can say that I did everything it took to be the version of them that they hoped for. That's huge, right? So where do I see this no regrets movement going? I am working currently on that next piece, and I'm inspired by books like The Tribe of Millionaires and these mastermind groups, and I'm looking at creating an ecosystem and an environment of high accountability, high candor, and high care amongst entrepreneurs that are willing to be vulnerable and also be ruthless in attacking the things that have been stealing from them and moving forward. I have some ideas. I have some frameworks mocked up with that. I haven't launched it yet. And you guys will be first to hear it. If you're on the podcast and you're listening, you'll be the first to hear it. So what can listeners expect from this podcast? Man, I'm excited to be interviewing people that I have found that have pieces of this done exceptionally well. And I want them to be able to share their story. Look, my story is just a jumping off point. What I've discovered is that this journey, this entrepreneur's regret journey, and this no regrets blueprint movement resonates with so many people. And I want to bring as many angles of this journey to the forefront so you can be learning from all of these individuals. So we're going to be having some powerful conversations around being present, around being an amazing spouse and a partner, and attacking this achievement addiction and growing and learning from that. Those are the types of conversations that I'm excited to bring to the audience. If someone's listening right now and feels like they're succeeding everywhere except the places that matter most, what's the first step? The first step is subscribe to this. The next step is I would go to the noregretsblueprint.com. And that's where you can find the core framework on doing this. And I would get in there right away and get the book, get the field guide, get the North Star values journal, and dive into the coach. And then there's some other bonuses in there as well that can help around this process, and really start paying attention to the things that we talked about on today's podcast that may be creeping in and creating that drift in your life. And then asking yourself, okay, am I willing to do what it takes to break this chain, to break this cycle? And if you are, you're going to find what you need to here. Okay, powerful closing question. This one's interesting. Matt, if this ended up being the last message you ever got to share with entrepreneurs, what would you want them to know? That's really good. The last question. The last message. You don't have as much time to create the moments as you think. And while you're building this, you can miss out on the most valuable parts of your life. Don't hesitate. Don't wait. And the other thing is, don't feel like being present in your life has a cost associated with it that like you can have it all. You can absolutely have a thriving business and the family life, the physical health and the relationships that you've always wanted and deserved. Like don't sacrifice one over the other. There's a cost to that that nobody ever wants to pay. And that's what true regret, that's what true regret looks like. Well, guys, that was the last question. So here's the thing. If this resonated with you, if you're still here at the end of this, we're 53 minutes in. If you're still listening and this resonated with you, I'd love to hear from you. Please feel free to comment, send a message. You can find me on socials, etc. And then better yet, send this to somebody that you care about. Send this to another entrepreneur that you know that this will help, and be their lifeline, if you will. And then stay tuned. I'm really looking forward to continuing to build these conversations and continue to share the message that you can have it all and be fully present with your family, with your kids, have time for yourself, and do the work. Anyway, I'm really excited to be bringing you this part of the journey, and I look forward to seeing you on the next episode. Take care, guys.
Remember, the goal isn't just success. It's building a life you'll never regret. If this episode impacted you, share it with someone chasing more. And I'll see you next time on the No Regrets Blueprint.